Joe Gallo, the deranged mobster who terrorized New York, lived a life like no other. He kidnapped mafia bosses, paraded with a lion, and ignited gang wars that left the streets drenched in blood. But his reign of terror came to a violent end in 1972. Joe Gallo's life was a wild spectacle, filled with bold, reckless acts and vicious feuds that left a trail of violence across New York City. Known as Crazy Joe, he wasn't just another mobster in the underworld, he was a notorious figure who reveled in his notoriety. From parading around Manhattan with a pet lion in tow to abducting high-ranking mafia members and igniting bloody conflicts within his crime family, Gallo's life was marked by chaos and danger. His relentless pursuit of power and defiance against the mafia's strict hierarchy ultimately led to a dramatic and violent demise. The end came on April 7, 1972, when Joe Gallo was enjoying his 43rd birthday at Umberto's Clam House in the heart of Little Italy. Accompanied by his family, the celebration turned deadly when a group of armed men suddenly stormed into the restaurant. As gunfire erupted, Gallo, with a seasoned reflex honed by years of living on the edge, leapt to his feet and drew his own weapon, attempting to return fire. Amid the chaos, he overturned a table to shield himself and maneuvered toward the exit, seemingly intent on leading the attackers away from his loved ones. The barrage of bullets found their mark before Gallo could escape. Though wounded, he managed to stagger into the street, only to collapse on the cold pavement, bleeding profusely. The gunman quickly fled the scene, leaving behind the mortally wounded mobster. When law enforcement arrived, they found Gallo struggling for his last breaths, a symbol of the violent lifestyle that had defined his existence. Joe Gallo's life was destined for turmoil and violence from the very beginning. Born in Brooklyn into a family already well acquainted with crime, Gallo was raised in the rough neighborhood of Kensington, where his father, a former bootlegger during the Prohibition era, operated a modest eatery. The small, greasy spoon was a far cry from fine dining, but it served as an early introduction to the harsh realities of life for young Joe. Surrounded by gritty characters and illegal dealings, it wasn't long before Gallo began to follow in his father's footsteps and embrace a life on the wrong side of the law. At just 16, Gallo made a choice that would seal his path to infamy. He dropped out of high school. Soon after, a car accident left him with a permanent nervous tic, a reminder of the danger and chaos that would become hallmarks of his life. During this period, he formed close ties with his friends, Peter Peek, the Greek Diapolos, and Frank Iliano, and together, they formed a small-time gang. The young criminals, hungry for power and quick cash, began plotting their first forays into the underworld, targeting petty schemes that would set the stage for more significant crimes down the road. As Gallo's reputation began to grow, he was drawn into the orbit of local mafia associates, who saw potential in the young gangster's fearlessness and ambition. It was during this time that he earned the nickname Joey the Blonde, a moniker given to him because of his light hair. Yet, there was another, deeper layer to the name, as Gallo had become captivated by Hollywood's portrayal of the criminal lifestyle. His fascination with gangster films, especially the 1947 noir classic Kiss of Death, was more than just a hobby, it was an obsession. Gallo frequently quoted the film's infamous character, Tommy Udo, played by Richard Widmark, adopting his mannerisms and speech patterns as if he were rehearsing for a role in his own real-life crime drama. Gallo's turbulent life took another significant turn in 1950 when he found himself facing legal trouble, leading to an arrest. As part of the court process, he underwent a psychological evaluation, where doctors diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. This diagnosis didn't deter Gallo. If anything, it only fueled his dangerous reputation. Over the next few years, his unpredictable behavior and increasing acts of violence earned him a new and more notorious nickname, Crazy Joe. This label, though a reflection of his diagnosed condition, also captured the chaotic and volatile essence of his criminal persona, cementing his status as one of the most unhinged figures in the New York underworld. Joe Gallo's entry into the criminal world was unconventional, but it quickly set him apart as a ruthless and ambitious young gangster. His early schemes revolved around stealing jukeboxes and candy machines, which he would then resell to local businesses. However, it didn't take long for his small-time hustling to escalate into something much more sinister. As his operations grew, Gallo became known as a jukebox racketeer, relying on intimidation and violence to establish his control. It wasn't just a matter of offering the machines for sale, he made sure that anyone who wanted one had no choice but to buy from him. In many cases, even those who didn't want a machine found themselves pressured into purchasing one, often with the threat of harm hanging over their heads. Gallo's reputation for coercion was epitomized by an incident involving a reluctant business owner who refused to buy one of his jukeboxes. According to accounts, Gallo drew a knife and held it menacingly to the man's throat, making it abundantly clear that refusing his offer was not an option. This kind of violent enforcement of his business interests only served to increase his infamy, marking him as a dangerous player in the local underworld. By 1958, Gallo's notoriety had reached such a level that it drew the attention of powerful figures in government. He was summoned to appear before Senator Bobby Kennedy during congressional hearings on organized crime, an event that showed just how infamous he had become. True to form, Gallo's attitude remained defiant and irreverent. As he walked into Kennedy's office, he took note of the elegant decor and remarked, "Nice carpet. Good for a crap game." This offhand comment, reported by the New York Daily News, captured Gallo's brazen personality and his disregard for authority. Joe Gallo's rise in the Mafia hierarchy continued as he aligned himself with the Prophesy crime family. His reputation as a skilled and ruthless enforcer quickly earned him a prominent role within the organization. It is widely believed that he was involved in one of the most infamous hits in Mafia history, the murder of Albert Anastasia, a notorious mob boss who once led Murder Incorporated, the Mafia's feared assassination squad. Anastasia was among the most dreaded figures in New York's underworld, a man whose very name struck fear into the hearts of his rivals. Yet, Gallo took a different approach to the assassination than most would have. While many would have preferred to keep their involvement in such a high-profile murder secret, Gallo, alongside his brothers Larry and Albert, as well as fellow mobster Carmine Persico, proudly claimed credit for gunning Anastasia down while he sat defenseless in a barber's chair. The hit became legendary, and Gallo's role in it further solidified his reputation as a fearless and unpredictable force within the Mafia. When asked about the brutal slaying, Gallo would later joke, "You can just call us the Barbershop Quartet," a darkly humorous acknowledgement of the cold-blooded nature of the crime. After orchestrating the assassination of Albert Anastasia, Joe Gallo expected nothing less than a substantial reward from his Mafia superiors. In his mind, the murder of such a powerful figure warranted recognition and a slice of the lucrative rackets within the crime family. However, when the family's boss, Joe Prophesy, did not deliver the compensation Gallo felt he had earned, resentment began to fester. Gallo, ever the opportunist, quietly started plotting to seize some of Prophesy's rackets for himself. His ambition was to expand his power base and assert dominance, even if it meant defying his own crime family. The word of Gallo's aspirations did not stay secret for long, reaching Prophesy's ears before Gallo could make his move. Determined to squash any threat to his authority, Prophesy ordered a hit on Gallo. For many, such a direct threat from a Mafia boss would be cause to lay low or flee the city. But Joe Gallo was not like most men. His unpredictability and boldness were legendary. Rather than retreat, Gallo responded with aggression that bordered on madness. He escalated the situation by taking matters into his own hands, literally. Gallo orchestrated the kidnapping of Prophesy's brother, Frank, along with three high-ranking members of the family, Joseph Magliocco, Salvatore Musacchia, and John Shimone. While Gallo's faction held these men as hostages, Joe Prophesy narrowly escaped capture himself, fleeing to Florida where he sought refuge from Gallo's wrath. The stage was now set for a bloody confrontation, as both sides geared up for a gang war that would tear the underworld apart. In the following months, the streets became battlegrounds, with a series of targeted killings marking the intensifying conflict between the Gallo crew and the Prophesy loyalists. Despite the hostilities, an agreement was eventually brokered to secure the safe release of the hostages, providing a glimmer of hope for peace. However, the promise of a truce was short-lived, as Prophesy broke the agreement almost immediately. He ordered hits on Larry Gallo, Joe's brother, as well as another associate named Joseph Gioielli. The attempted assassination on Larry Gallo failed, but it reignited the simmering tensions, plunging the factions back into full-scale warfare. As the conflict continued to escalate, Joe Gallo's fortunes took a dramatic turn for the worse. In 1961, before he could see the gang war to its conclusion, Gallo was arrested on charges of conspiracy and extortion. The charges were serious enough to land him a lengthy prison sentence, ranging from 7 to 14 years. Gallo's incarceration effectively sidelined him at a critical moment, preventing him from directing his crew's efforts in the ongoing power struggle. Nonetheless, his reputation as Crazy Joe endured, fueled by the stories of his reckless defiance and his unyielding will to challenge even the most formidable of foes within the Mafia. While Joe Gallo served his prison sentence, he took the opportunity to transform himself, adopting a more cultured and intellectual lifestyle. Rather than merely waiting out his time behind bars, Gallo delved into pursuits that set him apart from the typical image of a mobster. He began painting and developed a passion for literature and philosophy, immersing himself in books and the arts in a way that few men in the Mafia ever did. This period of self-reflection and learning seemed to give him a new outlook, or at least a different approach to his criminal endeavors. One of the most unusual aspects of Gallo's prison experience was the friendships he formed with black inmates. Such connections were almost unheard of within the Mafia's strict racial hierarchy, where close ties across racial lines were often discouraged or outright forbidden. Yet, Gallo built genuine relationships with his fellow prisoners, connections that went beyond mere convenience. This network would later prove valuable when he sought to extend his criminal influence into black neighborhoods upon his release, allowing him access to territories that were typically off-limits to outsiders. As soon as Gallo was back on the streets, rumors began circulating about his next move. It was said that Gallo was planning to leverage his new alliances to resume his war against the Prophesy family, which had since come under the leadership of Joseph Colombo. Gallo's ambition to challenge the powerful Mafia family had not waned during his time in prison. If anything, it had only grown stronger. Tensions reached a critical point in June 1971, when Joseph Colombo was shot at a public rally by an assailant who was disguised as a photographer. Though Colombo survived the attempt on his life, the bullet left him paralyzed and effectively ended his leadership of the family. The fact that the gunman was black led many of Colombo's associates to immediately suspect Gallo's involvement, given his known connections with black communities. Fingers pointed in his direction, and whispers of Gallo orchestrating the hit only intensified the animosity between him and the Colombo faction. Despite this dangerous situation, Gallo displayed a brazen disregard for his own safety. Even with the Colombo crime family actively seeking to eliminate him, he continued to flaunt his lifestyle and move around the city without taking any significant precautions. It was this recklessness that ultimately led to his downfall. In April 1972, just months after Colombo's shooting, Gallo was spotted by a Colombo associate dining at Umberto's Clam House in Little Italy. It did not take long for reinforcements to arrive. Armed men entered the restaurant and opened fire, gunning down Crazy Joe in a brutal hit. However, in the years that followed, conflicting accounts emerged regarding Gallo's death. Frank Sheeran, a notorious hitman affiliated with the Bufalino crime family, claimed that he was the one who carried out the assassination. Sheeran suggested that Gallo's flashy behavior and disregard for discretion had become a liability, prompting the Mafia to eliminate him. Despite Sheeran's assertions, no concrete evidence ever surfaced to confirm his involvement. The murder of Joe Gallo unleashed a wave of violence, sparking a new war between his loyalists and the Colombo family. Over the course of several years, the streets of New York became battlegrounds once more, with at least 10 men losing their lives in the ensuing series of gangland slayings. It was one of the bloodiest Mafia conflicts the city had seen in decades, a cycle of retaliation that only ceased when Gallo's surviving associates eventually reached a truce and were allowed to reintegrate into the Colombo family. During his final years, Gallo had tried to cultivate a different image, one that extended beyond the realm of organized crime. He mingled with New York's artistic and literary circles, seeking recognition as a countercultural figure or even a kind of folk hero. This romanticized version of Gallo's life caught the attention of cultural icons, including Bob Dylan, who famously immortalized the mobster in his song Joey. Reflecting on Gallo, Dylan remarked, "I never considered him a gangster. I always considered him some kind of hero. An underdog fighting against the elements." This posthumous legend contrasted sharply with the reality of Gallo's tumultuous and violent life, but it added yet another layer to the enduring story of Crazy Joe Gallo.